I like to think of myself as a good storyteller, but really in this kind of a venue or, environment, it is a very difficult thing. So I do want to thank all the storytellers before me for doing such an exceptional job, because I know how I can feel my voice shaking, and it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're talking about or sharing some very, very personal things that have created that trauma, that uncomfortableness that I talked about before. And I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here. So it's interesting when I listen to the stories, and I am kind of a deep thinker, and so my stories often come out sort of in a real depth. My story is all about perception, and my inner purpose feeling is truth. So when you have, when your story is about perception, so, what you perceive is only true if you believe it. Perception has been my greatest adversary in life and also my greatest ally, because it was my adversary when I was younger, and I developed these perceptions as a young child, and I believed them to be true. And what I found out not long ago, I'm 58 years old, and I think that it took me until about the age of 45 until I realized that everything I believed about my relationship with my mother up until that point was false. And that's a lot to sort of take in and figure out, and because I actually had destroyed my relationship with my mother completely. So I'll just go back and give a little bit of history, and I'm not going to give it all because I want you to read the chapter. I want you to read the book. So just on that note, know that what the authors have shared here, there's so much more in the book, so please do read the book. So my earliest recollection of being a child was around 4 years old, and I know I was 4 because I have 2 older sisters, and they were in school, like in grade 1 or, in the full day school. And I was 4, and I had my first year of my life to be at home with my mom. My mom was a housewife. She worked at home. And I just relished in that experience. I mean, I thought I was the most special child in the world because I got to be with my mother every day, wake up with her, have breakfast with her, spend time with her, and she was a great mom. She played dolls with me, she baked with me, she nurtured and supported me to be really creative, because I am a creative person. I work from that side of my brain most of the time. So, I had to really learn as I got older to use the other side of my brain so that I could balance everything out, because I'm such a feeling person. And she saw that in me. So, we didn't have a lot of money when I was young. They were immigrants from Holland, and, it's the whole story about coming over on the boat with the $50 and the baby, and they didn't have much. But my mom made sure I had that box of Crayola crayons and the paper and the glue and everything, and she would sit down with me. She took the time to do that. And she was an Avon lady. Anyone remember the Avon lady? So she was the Avon lady, and she had the kit with all those lipsticks in it, all the different colors. And she let me sit at the table and ruin every sample of lipstick, because I loved them, all the colors. So she adored me, and I adored her. And there were, every morning, my father was a shift worker at a factory, and on the night shift, when he was coming home later, I would wake up at dawn, and I would tiptoe into my mom's room, and I would get into bed with her. And I would feel her hand come across the bed sheets, and she would take my hand and hold my hand, and I would pretend to be sleeping. And that feeling of her, that connection, it was just pure love. And I remember just thinking that I was like better than my sisters because I got to experience this and have her all to myself. Well, then it was time for me to go to the big girl school, and I didn't want to go. And she made me go, and I was really angry with her. I'd never been angry with my mother before that, even though I was very young, but I'd never experienced that kind of anger, because she doted on me and she let me do whatever I wanted to do. And now all of a sudden she was making me go to the school and away from her. And I don't know why I didn't think that was going to happen, because my sisters went. But anyways, I had to go. And I walked to school with her, and I remember arguing with her and telling her I wasn't going to go. And it was the first recollection I have in my life of wanting to be right with my mother. And it didn't end. And what developed over the years was that we had this push-pull relationship where I wanted to be right, and she wanted to be right. And it became this game of control back and forth. It was not bad when I was younger, but as I moved into my teen years, I started to realize that I didn't want to be like her anymore. So when I was young, I emulated her and I wanted to be like her. And then I realized that I didn't want to be like her anymore. I didn't even like people saying to me, you're so much like your mother, you look like your mother. I remember when my daughter, Olivia, here, when she was growing up, and people, it's amazing how things come back to you, right? Because we'd be walking along and someone would say, well, you look so much like your mother. Danielle just said that today. Your daughter looks so much like you. And I remember when people would say that, and I would just shudder because I didn't want to damage my child. Because I had that thinking, that perception that, I didn't want to be like my mother anymore, so surely to God, Olivia wouldn't want to look like me or be like me. And maybe that's true, I don't know. Anyways, so as time went on, my perception of my mother changed, and it confused me, because she was someone who I loved so much and wanted to be like and wanted to be with so much, and all of a sudden I started to shift. So I was in my teenage years, and I remember just almost repelling her, and I was mean to her. She would say to me, you're so much like me, and I would say, no, I'm not. Like, I didn't want to be like her. I didn't want to like the things she liked. I didn't want her to think I liked the things she liked. And I was really actually quite mean to her, and I pushed her aside. And what happened when that occurred was that my mother, and I get it now, my perception was that my mother began to control me, and she tried to hang on to me. And the more she did that, the more I pushed her away. And I kept pushing, and she kept pulling. And my perception was that she was trying to control me. But now I know what she was doing was she was hanging on for dear life because she thought she was losing me. She loved me so much, and she didn't want to lose me. Then I met my husband, Hank, and he recognized what was happening with me, and he supported me because he realized that I was trying to autonomize, and I was growing into my adulthood and my own self, and that I needed to be different. And I was actually kind of using my mother as a way to distinguish myself, individualize myself in the world and be my own self. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, except that I really wasn't very nice to her. So years and years and years of this kind of patterning went on, and we pushed and we pulled and we pushed and we pulled. And it became so horrible that we couldn't even be around each other anymore, and we damaged our relationship completely. So fast forward to about a year ago, I think, my daughter and Nick got engaged to be married. They just married this past June. And during that time, I started having a bit of a deja vu moment, because I could feel the perception maybe, or maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't, but I could feel that my daughter was kind of pulling away from me. And the deja vu came when I realized that was me so many years ago. And it all in that moment just made so much sense. It was just something she said to me. It wasn't a bad thing. She didn't treat me like I treated my mother. She's a nice girl. But it was clearly a moment of autonomy for her, and she was putting a boundary in front of me. And in that moment, I realized, oh my God, the perception I had about what my mother was doing was totally false. She was just loving me, and she just wanted it to be like it always had been. And I pushed her away for 40 years. It's a long time. So thank you for that, because you gave me that ooh-hoo, ha-ha moment. And what happened after that is that I reconciled with my mother. And we had that difficult conversation that I spoke about earlier in my talk. We talked about all the uncomfortableness and all the horrible things that I owned everything that I had done, and without any expectation of her owning any of it at all either. She's 88 years old now. So, she admitted it. We were driving up to Ucluelet to Olivia and Nick's wedding is when we had the conversation. And she just looked at me and she said, I don't even remember doing any of that stuff. Like, I don't even understand. I don't know what you're talking about. It's beyond my realm of understanding. Like, her perception was not that any of that happened. That's what my story is about just really, my inner purpose feeling is truth, and so it's so relevant for me because I sometimes I go to chaos in understanding what is the truth, what is the perception of truth that I have about certain things, and just that moment with my mom and driving up to Ucluelet and being able to express myself and us having that conversation changed everything for us. We talk every week now on the phone. She's back in Ontario. She calls me, we have conversations. She, I sent her my book, and she's really quite cute because I sent her my book, and she knew that the story was about her and I in the book, and she didn't ask me any questions about the story, and I asked her if she wanted to read it before I published it, because I wanted to make sure that she would be okay with it. And I've not, I've done it in a very compassionate way. It was more about my responsibility in the relationship and what happened. And she said, I don't need to read it. She said, you didn't say anything mean, did you? And I said, no, of course not. So she said, okay, it's fine. And so then she phoned me on Friday, this past Friday, and she said, I got the book the other day, and I read the book all the way to the end, and I'm the last chapter. And I said, oh, that's good, Mom, that's great. She goes, oh my God, I'm so glad that Scott and John made everything okay in the end. She said, I'm just so very happy. And I said, oh, well, that's good. And then I waited. And she said, okay, well, we're off to your sister's for Thanksgiving, so we'll talk again next week. And I said, okay. And I hung up the phone, and then I sat there for a moment, and I thought, okay, well, what's my perception about that? So what was she thinking, and what is she, like, is she upset? Is she okay? And I thought, okay, just stop the chaos in your brain. I don't need to go there now. It's okay. She wasn't angry with me. She was just, expressing how she really felt. Maybe she's fearful of the reality of that story. So where am I now with that? Well, I have such a sense of calm about knowing the truth about my relationship with my mom. I try not to go to regret that I created that, because I really don't think that from my heart I did that intentionally. It was just sort of a mode of emotional survival at the time and wanting to be who I am. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm going to pass it back to Scott, and he will do his thing. But
interpretive dance.
Yeah, it's interpretive dance. But I'm feeling just so very blessed that everybody is here together and connecting. I feel like I'm sick to death of saying the word connection and connecting, but it just is what it is. It's the perfect word. And isn't it nice to sit together in a room and have a glass of wine? And this is what Nick and Olivia and my family do all the time, is we have conversations. We have drank a lot of wine in our time and eaten a lot of sourdough bread, but we've had such great conversations around the dinner table. And I feel like we just need to keep doing that. I know everybody gets tired and it's a long night, so I really, really, really appreciate you all coming out here and sharing this book and sharing each other. Thank you.